the Palestinian people for what Hamas is doing. We are trying to target these tunnels, the places in which they hide weapons and missiles. The beginning of these tunnels are within the population centers. They are calling the people, their own people, to stay in places in which we call them to live because we need to target and to act against these tunnels. You know, I know that, and believe me, it's not like the world is feeling uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable as well.
Rumored discussions of a ceasefire are little more than a whisper in the explosive din still being heard on the ground in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Missiles continue flying between the two sides, and now the Israeli military has brought in their air power to strike at the heart of Hamas. While Israel reserves and deserves the right to defend itself, what is happening to the civilian population in Gaza has the world more than a little shocked and more than a bit angry. Greater steps are not being taken to separate the innocents from the terrorists. Let us welcome in MidPoint, Senior Fellow and Chair for the Study of Islamic Radicalism at the Potomac Institute for Policy Studies and a former Islamic extremist from Egypt, Dr. Tawfik Hamid. Dr. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
There is the first question right there. There is now discussion that Israel is going after military individuals, those connected with Hamas. They are going after them in private homes with rockets, and there are civilians that are being killed. The world wants to know, as advanced as the Israeli military is, could they not do a better job in not having so much, and I hate to use this phrase, but it's used in military terms, collateral damage?
It's unavoidable. The collateral damage here is unavoidable. Like trying to remove cancer, sometimes you have to get some of the normal flesh around it. And when you see here the situation, you have to blame Hamas first for these casualties, because Israel actually is trying to be very precise in its operations. Had Israel was not precise in its operations, the casualties would have been 100 times more. So we are dealing here with the situation where Hamas members hide among civilians, put their weapons inside civilian places, and then they go blame Israel. If someone to be blamed for the killing of the hundreds of civilians, it is Hamas, not Israel.
But let's be fair, because that's what we want to do here. A New York Times report talked about this specific story, that a specific family, the Abu Jameh family, according to relatives, had a guest in the home. This guest was identified as Ahmad Suleiman Sakmoud, a member of Hamas's military wing who was visiting a member of the family. There was one member of Hamas there. The rockets took out the apartment and killed the entire family. Is it not fair to say, though, that Israel still needs to take great strides in order to make sure that as many civilians as possible do not die in situations reportedly such as this?
Look, Israel has two options: either to attack this militant, and there will be some civilian casualties, or do not attack him and let him attack the Israeli civilians and kill them. So, and when you put in consideration that Hamas is the one that started the attacks on Israel, then you blame no one in this situation but the Hamas member who went to his civilian family, so or friend. So I think in this situation we need to realize that some Palestinian civilians are suffering. Yes, we agree, we accept this. However, the cause of their suffering is Hamas organization, and the only way to stop their suffering is to weaken Hamas, defeat it, and prevent it from doing this again and again.
Let's listen again to what John Kerry has had to say, the American Secretary of State in Cairo right now, seeking to form some sort of a bond or find some sort of a way to at least stop the shelling. He was in Egypt to speak with the Egyptian foreign minister about brokering the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Here's what the Secretary had to say.
We are hopeful that this visit will result in a ceasefire that provides the necessary security for the Palestinian people, and that we can commence to address the medium and long-term issues related to Gaza.
All right, now that was one of the foreign ministers talking specifically about it now. When we talk about the fact that Hamas has turned down a number of potential ceasefires here, we keep hearing that it's because it is an Egyptian-sponsored ceasefire proposal. Now there is word out that Hamas will only accept it if it comes from Qatar or Turkey, two states where the Muslim Brotherhood is still in power and is still working with these two countries right now. Seriously, though, are those two countries about really to create any sort of a possible ceasefire here, or is this just a stalling tactic by Hamas?
Tactic by Hamas, because Egypt is the country that actually suffered most for the Palestinian cause. We, as I'm an Egyptian basically, we went into wars against Israel several times in history because of the Palestinians. And the border with the Palestinians is not in the hands of Turkey or Qatar. We are the ones who have the geographical border with Hamas. So Hamas, by doing this, is just trying to delay the process and continue its attacks on Israel and continue the fight, because the more prolonged the fight is, the more Hamas will be able to gain more money from donations. They go everywhere in the world and ask for donations for your fellow Palestinian brothers, your fellow Muslim brothers. They go to mosques, they go everywhere to collect more money. For them, the prolongation of the war is directly for their benefit, especially when they have been defeated politically in different places because of their affiliation to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Is there a peaceful solution here, or are we kidding ourselves every time we think those words?
Look, peaceful solutions can happen when the evildoers are defeated. Like in the Nazi, for example, when he was defeated, Hitler, and the Nazi system, then we started to have peace. Without having serious defeat for Hamas organization and for the Islamic radical groups, here defeat both militarily and non-militarily defeat by all ways. This is the first step toward having peaceful solution. There are some peaceful solutions through education, through media. You can change the mindset of people. You can use religion in a different form, reformed interpretations to prevent the anti-Semitism in the Arab and Muslim world. However, without this stage of military defeat, and it has to be completed. It's like a doctor here. You give half dose of antibiotic, you lose, but you have to give full dose here to defeat the opponent. And once the opponent is defeated, as we have seen in history, like the Nazi, peace happened after that. So both together are two steps, one followed by the other. But you can't just go now and ask for peaceful resolutions before defeating such groups.
Are you equating Hamas with the Nazis?
They are, in my view, worse, because their first part of the charter of Hamas, go read it after our talk, it states clearly that their mission is to annihilate all the Jews, to kill every Jew. So if this is their mission, tell me what's the difference between Hamas and the Nazis then?
As we have seen in Iraq, the fighting there is not limited to Jews versus Muslims here. Now we have Palestinians and Israelis. Can you compare this? Is this a mirror of Israel, what is happening in other countries as well when we talk about religious sects and factions going at each other for generations?
Look, the comparison here, there is some similarities, which is radical Islamists in Hamas or in other Islamic groups like Daesh or Al-Nusra in Syria. They are all the enemies of humanity, of civilizations. In the Palestinian area, they attack Israel. In Iraq, they attack Christians and even Muslims who do not follow the same views. They kill Shia, they attack the Sufis. So the concept here is you deal with an enemy that does not want to accept the other. It's like Hamas does not want to accept the existence of Israel. It is the same Daesh and the other radical group do not want the existence of Shia or Christians. That's why they kicked them out of Mosul. But when you compare them at quantitative level, there is no comparison, because the civilian casualties, for example, in Israel is unintentional. But in Daesh or ISIS group in Syria and Iraq, the civilian casualties are intentional. They behead people intentionally to create fear among the other, to subjugate to them. So there is no comparison at the quantitative level of the deaths. In fact, the number of deaths in Syria and Iraq has exceeded thousands of innocents in the last few weeks. So we are dealing with a real humanitarian situation compared to something that could be much smaller than what's happening really in Iraq and Syria against our civilization. I will not call it's against Christians only or Shia or liberal Muslims, against all our civilization.
I only have about 15 seconds left. We've heard the possibility of an occupation of Gaza by the Israeli army. Would that be smart?
It can be smart if it is well planned, and it will end completely the power of Hamas, because when Israel started this, it has to continue it till the end. Otherwise, all the Israeli casualties will be lost for no reason. So the Israel has to continue the mission to defeat Hamas and prevent its ability to launch attacks on Israel.
Dr. Tawfik Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. We will do it again, sir.
My pleasure.
It is a story we're going to keep following all day long. Next up, let's just give Hillary Clinton the Democratic presidential nomination right now and cease all this unnecessary prattle. Or perhaps not. That's coming up next, right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.